If I told you that one of the foods you've been told to eat every single day for your heart might actually be increasing your risk of a heart attack more than cholesterol ever did, you'd probably think that's clickbait. But stay with me for a moment, because what I'm about to explain is something most people have never heard from their doctor, never seen on a food label, and yet it's backed by decades of cardiology research that simply doesn't fit into neat headlines. For years, cholesterol has been painted as the villain, eggs were demonized, butter was banished, and an entire generation was taught that low fat automatically meant heart healthy. And during that same time, heart disease didn't disappear. In many countries, it actually got worse. So the real question we need to ask is this: what changed in our diet that was supposed to protect our hearts, but may have quietly been doing the opposite? As a cardiologist, I want to start by clearing something up right away. Cholesterol itself is not the enemy most people think it is. Cholesterol is a vital molecule. Your body uses it to build hormones, repair cells, and maintain the integrity of your blood vessels. The problem is not cholesterol existing in your blood. The problem is what damages the arteries and creates an environment where cholesterol becomes dangerous. And this is where the conversation shifts away from cholesterol alone and towards something far more insidious that's been hiding in plain sight under the label of healthy. For decades, dietary guidelines pushed people away from natural fats and toward foods marketed as heart-friendly alternatives. Vegetable oils, seed oils, and heavily processed low-fat products flooded the market. These oils were praised because they lowered LDL cholesterol numbers on a blood test. That looked like a win, but lowering a lab number is not the same thing as reducing heart attacks, and that distinction is critical. What matters in cardiology is not just cholesterol levels, but inflammation, oxidative stress, insulin resistance, and damage to the lining of your arteries, known as the endothelium. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Many so-called healthy oils are highly processed, chemically extracted, and unstable when exposed to heat, light, and oxygen. When these oils are heated, reused, or simply sit on shelves for months, they oxidize. Oxidized fats are profoundly inflammatory. They trigger damage inside your blood vessels, making them more permeable and more prone to plaque formation. In that environment, LDL particles are more likely to become oxidized themselves, and oxidized LDL is what actually drives atherosclerosis, not cholesterol floating harmlessly in your bloodstream. Now let's talk about how this plays out in real life. Think about the typical heart-healthy meal. It's often low in saturated fat, but high in refined carbohydrates and cooked in vegetable oils. Whole grain bread, pasta, cereal, and low-fat dressings made with seed oils. On paper, it looks virtuous, but metabolically, it's a perfect storm. Refined carbs spike blood sugar. Blood sugar spikes trigger insulin release. Chronic insulin elevation leads to insulin resistance. Insulin resistance promotes inflammation, weight gain, high triglycerides, and low HDL, a pattern strongly associated with heart disease. At the same time, those inflammatory oils are damaging the arterial lining. The body tries to repair that damage using cholesterol, like a patch. Cholesterol shows up at the scene of the crime, but it didn't commit the crime. Yet cholesterol gets blamed, while the underlying damage keeps happening day after day. One of the biggest myths I see in my practice is the idea that if your cholesterol number is normal, your heart is safe. I've treated patients with so-called perfect cholesterol who still had heart attacks in their 40s and 50s. When we look deeper, we often find high levels of inflammation, poor blood sugar control, and diets dominated by ultra-processed foods marketed as healthy. Conversely, I've seen patients with higher cholesterol who have clean arteries, excellent metabolic health, and low inflammation because their diets are built around real, unprocessed foods. Another major issue is how these healthy foods are consumed. Seed oils are everywhere. They're in salad dressings, protein bars, plant-based meat substitutes, and even foods labeled organic or heart smart. Most people are consuming far more of these oils than they realize, often multiple times a day. This constant exposure overwhelms the body's antioxidant defenses and creates chronic low-grade inflammation. Over time, that inflammation accelerates plaque formation, destabilizes existing plaques, and increases the risk of heart attack and stroke. Let's also talk about what happens when fat is removed from food. Fat provides satiety. It slows digestion and keeps blood sugar stable. When manufacturers remove fat, they often replace it with sugar, starch, or additives to make the food palatable. This leads people to eat more, snack more often, and experience frequent blood sugar swings. From a cardiology perspective, those swings are damaging. Repeated spikes in glucose and insulin injure blood vessels just as surely as smoking does. So what should people actually be focusing on if cholesterol isn't the main villain? The answer is metabolic health and inflammation. The strongest predictors of heart disease are insulin resistance, abdominal obesity, high triglycerides, low HDL, and elevated inflammatory markers. These are driven primarily by diet quality, not just fat quantity. Diets based on whole foods, adequate protein, natural fats, vegetables, and minimal ultra-processing consistently show improvements in these markers, even if cholesterol numbers don't fit the old textbook definition of perfect. This doesn't mean cholesterol is irrelevant. It means it's part of a much bigger picture. Particle size, oxidation, and context matter. A mildly elevated LDL in someone with low inflammation and good insulin sensitivity is very different from the same number in someone with metabolic syndrome. Unfortunately, the public conversation rarely makes that distinction. Now, I want to be very clear. This is not about telling you to eat junk food or ignore medical advice. It's about questioning simplistic narratives. It's about understanding that foods can lower cholesterol while simultaneously increasing heart attack risk by promoting inflammation and metabolic dysfunction. That's the paradox most people are never told about. What should you do instead? Start by prioritizing foods that look like food, ingredients you recognize, fats that humans have consumed for generations rather than industrially refined oils invented in the last century. Pay attention to how foods affect your energy, hunger, and blood sugar, not just the number on a nutrition label. And most importantly, have a nuanced conversation with your healthcare provider that goes beyond total cholesterol. The future of heart health is not about fearing cholesterol. It's about reducing inflammation, stabilizing blood sugar, and supporting the natural repair mechanisms of the body. When you do that, cholesterol often takes care of itself, and your risk of heart disease drops in ways no low-fat label ever could. So let's bring this all together. Cholesterol has been misunderstood and unfairly blamed for decades. Meanwhile, certain foods promoted as healthy have quietly fueled inflammation and metabolic damage, increasing heart attack risk despite improving cholesterol numbers. Heart health is not about chasing a single lab value. It's about creating an internal environment where your arteries can stay strong and resilient over time. If you remember just one thing from this video, let it be this. Lowering cholesterol on paper does not automatically mean protecting your heart in real life. If you found this information valuable, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and let me know in the comments what topic you want to see next.